In February 303 AD, Emperor Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletian issued the first of 4 imperial edicts that would ignite what later became known as the Great Persecution, the most organized and ruthless assault ever carried out against Christians by the Roman state. Proclaimed from Nicomedia, the eastern imperial capital, this decree did more than restrict Christian activity, it effectively declared their existence illegal. According to Lactantius, a contemporary Roman historian and later Christian apologist, Diocletian, influenced by his co-Augustus Galerius and conservative pagan priests, sought to cleanse the empire of what he regarded as a dangerous, subversive sect. Christianity, with its rejection of the imperial cult and Roman gods, was viewed as an affront to Rome's religious and political order. The edict ordered Christian churches demolished, sacred writings burned, assemblies outlawed, and believers removed from all positions of public authority. Rank offered no protection, senators and equestrians were stripped alongside commoners. The objective was clear and uncompromising: Christianity was to be erased from Roman life. Eusebius of Caesarea, writing in his ecclesiastical history, records how soldiers swept through churches across the eastern provinces, ripping down altars, plundering sanctuaries, and burning scriptures in public forums. In Nicomedia itself, the city's great church was destroyed under direct imperial command, on the very day the edict was posted. That same week, Christian bishops were arrested en masse. Some were tortured for refusing to surrender sacred texts, others were put to death. This decree marked a decisive shift. 2 centuries of sporadic, localized persecution were transformed under Diocletian into an official, empire-wide policy of terror. Torture, imprisonment, and martyrdom were now sanctioned instruments of state power, all justified in the name of preserving Rome's ancestral gods and imperial unity. The empire-wide executions of bishops. Between 303 and 305 AD, the Roman Empire, under Diocletian and his fellow tetrarchs, initiated a coordinated campaign of extermination aimed not merely at Christians in general, but specifically at their leadership, the bishops. This was no unintended consequence of repression. It was a deliberate decapitation of the Church's command structure, carried out through systematic torture, mutilation, and execution. In Nicomedia, Bishop Anthimus was seized and subjected to prolonged interrogation. Eusebius recounts that he was scourged with metal-tipped whips, then paraded through the streets before being beheaded. His severed head was displayed publicly, intended to terrorize the surrounding Christian population. In Alexandria, Peter of Alexandria, a revered bishop and theologian, was arrested in secret. Lactantius describes how Peter was confined in total darkness for months, deprived of food, and repeatedly beaten, before finally being dragged to execution and beheaded. The bishops of North Africa endured some of the most brutal punishments. Felix of Thebeuca, who refused to surrender the scriptures, was branded with red-hot metal across his face and chest. Roman guards scorched his flesh while forcing his mouth open, attempting to burn pages of scripture before his eyes, a calculated, symbolic destruction of the word through the body of its guardian. He was ultimately burned alive. These executions were public, ritualized, and meticulously planned. Their purpose was terror. Bishops were not simply killed, they were shattered, physically and symbolically. Their bodies became warnings. Their blood, offerings to the empire's gods. Their enforced silence, Rome's command. Under Diocletian's will, martyrdom was transformed into spectacle, and the bishops of the early church became the tortured foundation stones of a persecuted faith. Public burnings during the Great Persecution. Among the most horrifying displays of Diocletian's Great Persecution were the public burnings, executions designed not merely to kill, but to intimidate, erase identity, and silence belief in full view of Roman society. Between 303 and 305 AD, these burnings were staged across the empire in city centers, theaters, and military camps, serving as both punishment and propaganda. According to Eusebius of Caesarea in Martyrs of Palestine, entire groups of Christians were condemned to the flames for refusing to sacrifice to Roman gods. In cities such as Nicomedia, Caesarea, and Antioch, pyres were erected in public squares. Those who persisted in their refusal were bound, drenched in oil, and thrown alive into the fire, their deaths intended to instruct, terrify, and dominate all who watched. These were not outbreaks of random mob brutality, they were acts sanctioned by imperial decree, commanded by Roman governors and carried out with disciplined, military efficiency. One of the earliest documented incidents took place in Nicomedia. Shortly after the first edict was issued, a fire erupted within the imperial palace. Responsibility was placed on the Christians, and in the aftermath, executions escalated dramatically. Eusebius records that men and women alike, the elderly and the young, were handed over to the flames, in mass killings. Some perished clutching their sacred texts, as the empire sought not merely to extinguish lives, but to annihilate memory and faith itself. Lactantius, writing in De Mortibus Persecutorum, recounts how Christian virgins were stripped, publicly paraded, and burned alive. In the region of Phrygia, reports tell of an entire Christian settlement, including a church packed with worshippers, being encircled and set alight by order of the provincial governor. Escape was forbidden. None survived. Fire carried meaning. Within Roman ritual, it symbolized purification, yet here, it was transformed into an instrument of extermination. The punishment served dual objectives. It ensured total destruction of the body and denied Christians proper burial, striking at their belief in resurrection. These killings were not private penalties, they were spectacles. Publicly staged, they were designed to instill fear and enforce obedience. Under the Great Persecution, fire became an official weapon of the state. Systematic executions by beasts in Roman arenas. During Diocletian's Great Persecution, Rome revived one of its most terrifying and theatrical methods of death, damnatio ad bestias, sentencing Christians to be killed by wild animals before the public. Rooted in earlier persecutions, this practice now evolved into a coordinated system of state terror, implemented across provinces and supervised by governors charged with enforcing imperial anti-Christian laws. Eusebius of Caesarea, in the Martyrs of Palestine, offers harrowing descriptions of mass executions in the amphitheater at Caesarea Maritima. Christians were hauled into the arena amid roaring crowds and torn apart by lions, leopards, and bears. Stripped of clothing, bound in chains, and left defenseless, many prayed aloud as the gates were thrown open. Some endured scourging or mutilation beforehand to intensify the spectacle. In 304 AD, an especially savage episode unfolded in Tyre. Eusebius recounts how men and women were marched into the arena. Some were impaled with iron hooks, others were fastened to stakes as beasts were unleashed. Children were not exempt. Roman officials orchestrated these displays with intent, frequently timing them to coincide with festivals in order to draw larger crowds and amplify imperial authority. In North Africa, martyr narratives such as the Passion of the Cilician Martyrs and the Acts of the Martyrs of Carthage, though drawn from earlier sources, reveal the continued use of these executions during the Diocletianic period. Witnesses described Christians kneeling in prayer as animals charged toward them, refusing to resist or flee. The objective was terror through spectacle. Roman arenas functioned simultaneously as execution sites and tools of psychological warfare. Death by beasts was a ritualized performance meant to demonstrate Rome's supremacy over nature and rebellion alike. Fear, humiliation, and public suffering were weaponized to deliver an unmistakable message. Refusal to honor Rome's gods would not end quietly, but in public annihilation of both body and belief. These atrocities exposed not only Rome's desperation to preserve its divine order, but the lengths to which power will go to destroy what it cannot command. In doing so, the empire forged legends, martyrs, and a resistance that outlived its rule.